How much is that doggie in the window? The little pigtailed girl stared into the window at the tiny puppy. Her eyes were wide with excitement and an underlining fear. Dangling above that puppy was a saw. The blades swirled with their dreadful promise. Tears welled in her eyes. She rushed in, holding her tears back as best she could. It did not take her long to find the man in the apron with the jagged, swirled mustache. He was looking at her with a curious expression. His pupils were made out of money signs that gleamed. "Excuse me, sir?" she asked. The man in the apron with the jagged, twirled mustache and money eyes continued to look down at her. He exposed his wide grin the moment she spoke. "Yes?" His tone sounded innocent, yet he knew exactly what was going on. "How much is the doggie in the window?" she asked. "The one with the waggly tail?" he responded. She nodded her head, still holding her tears back. "Ah, yes, that one. Well, I just got him yesterday. So he is at the lowest price, $1. He pulled at his mustache as he talked. It would stretch out and recoil like a pig's tail. The little girl's frown deepened. She held out her hand with palm open. "Is this enough?" The man leaned close with his right eye, less than an inch from her palm. "Oh, I'm so sorry. You are 1 penny short." "I could go home and get more," she protested. He lifted his face up and stood straight, towering over her once again. "Oh, we close in 20 minutes, I'm sorry." His tone was flat and empty of any hope of making the exception this one time. The little girl rushed out of the store and sprinted to the bus to get home. It took her 1 hour to get there. She spent the whole night tossing and turning, unable to sleep. In the morning, the first thing she did was break her piggy bank. There was a whole $1. She snatched it up and rushed to the bus. "Hold on there, little baby," her father called out. She stopped, turned around, with the same tears ready to burst. "You have chores to do. It's Saturday, and that's the day you're supposed to do your chores. You agreed on that." "But, Daddy," she protested. He stood up and lectured her for 15 minutes. She had no choice but to do the chores, which would take hours. Finally, she was free at the afternoon. She rushed, missing the bus by only 2 seconds. Another half-hour passed, and she finally caught another bus. Only this time, she could see the sun beginning to set. Finally, she arrived at the pet store. Even from across the street, she could see the man in the apron with the twirled mustache and the money eyes staring at her, smiling a wide grin. She looked at the puppy. It whimpered, begging her to get him out of there. Above the puppy, the saw was slightly lower and slightly faster. The speed was slow but promising. She ran into the store. The man watched her as she entered. "Excuse me, sir. How much is the puppy in the window?" she asked. "The one with the waggly tail?" he responded. She nodded. $2. This time she did cry. The man stuck out his hand with his face turned and nose snubbed away. She left without a word. She plopped on the curb, trying to think. A car drove by, splashing a puddle on her. Her eyes were indistinguishable from her soaked clothing. She went back on the bus, and it took her home. She spent the remainder of the night rummaging through couch cushions and hidden corners for anything. This time she managed to gain not only enough money, but an additional $1, plus some change, just in case the man raised the puppy price yet again. Eventually she fell asleep, but this time determined to buy that puppy. The next day was Monday, so she was forced to go to school, then do her homework. Finally, however, she made her way to the pet store, and once again the man with the apron, twirled mustache, and money eyes stared at her as she approached the store. She looked at the puppy. The blade was slightly lower and slightly faster. She rushed inside. "Excuse me, sir. How much is the puppy in the window?" "The one with the waggly tail?" She nodded and waited. $4. She opened her mouth to protest or complain, but held her composure. She closed her eyes and took in a deep breath. "Could you sell him in credit? I have $3 right now." The money-eyed man shook his head, but held his grin. What if I worked for you for the rest of the day? Could that earn me $1 and I could buy the puppy? The money-eyed man shook his head and held his grin. She raised a finger to try another idea, but closed her mouth, attempting to sound as uncomplacent as possible in hopes that he would not raise the price of the puppy once more. She left without saying another word. Prior to the bus once again taking her home, she walked around the city searching for anything that could get her the needed funds to buy the puppy in the window with the waggly tail. For reasons she could not fathom, she walked down a back alley. There she found a sleeping man. He was covered in crumpled newspaper, but he had a bowl in front of him that had change in it. As quickly and as quietly as she could muster, she snatched up the drunkard's daily savings and rushed to an unseen place to count. Sure enough, this was money, plus what she already had was $7. She smiled for the first time since this whole thing started and rushed to the pet store. The man with the apron, twirled mustache, and money eyes was locking the door and going home. Oh, please, mister, I have enough money. Please, 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 she begged. The man swatted her hands away that were pulling at his apron. His pace never slowed. He left. The girl stood at the front of the store, staring at the puppy with the waggly tail. It wagged not out of excitement, but out of fear of the blade just above it that whirled even now. She put her hand on the glass. It put its hand on the paw, on the same portion of the glass on the inside. I'll get you out, I promise. She reached to the door and tugged it. It was no use. It was locked. She looked around, and it did not take her long to find a brick. She brought up her arm to break the window and rescue the puppy, only to have her wrist grabbed by a policeman. Now, what's going on here, little missy? I'll have none of that. You go home now. His tone was jaunty but firm. She dropped the brick and with her free hand pointed at the blade above the puppy that loomed threatening its very existence. The policeman shrugged. Rules are rules, little missy. You go on home now. But... She was interrupted. Go home, and if I catch you trying something like that again, you'll go straight to jail. The girl cried her way to the bus stop, cried on the bus ride, cried her way into her home, and cried herself to sleep. The next day, she had to go to school once again. Instead of going home after school, she went straight to the pet shop. She marched straight to the man. Excuse me, sir, how much is the puppy in the window? The one with the waggly tail? She didn't respond. Her cold stare into his money eyes wanted this to end. She didn't care what it would take at this point. $8. Her brow furrowed. She looked back at the puppy. The blade was even lower and quite fast now. The puppy could stand up straight, but no higher. A mere jump would end it. She looked back at the money-eyed man. I have $7. The man shrugged. $8. She had to walk out just to not kick him in the shin. She placed her hand on the glass once again, and the puppy did the same. I promise I'll do whatever it takes, she whispered. The little girl walked around town, knowing full well she will not have the same luck in rescuing the acquiring funds like she did the previous day. So she eventually found a pawn shop. Excuse me, sir, she said to the man at the register. Yes? He responded with his hand, waving her to hurry up with her inquiry. How much can I sell this for? She presented her infinity bus ticket that allowed her to take the bus for free. Best I could do was $8. The girl nodded and accepted her $8. Without wasting any more time, she went into full sprint to get to the pet store. The sun was already setting, and she knew it would close any moment now. The store lights were still on, and the man in the apron with the twirled mustache and money eyes stared at her with a wide grin. A bus passed between her and the view of the store. When the bus no longer obstructed her view, the store lights were already off, and the man with the money eyes was already locking the door. No! She shouted, then dropped to her knees, still on the other side of the street. Her sobs dropped into a whisper. I have the money. The man ignored her and went home. She dragged her feet all the way home, which took hours. She went to sleep from exhaustion. The next day, her eyes held bags little girls should not have, and her body ached from so much walking. She shuffled her feet out of bed and went to school. The long walk home exhausted her all the more. When she got home, she noticed her father napping. She snuck her hand into his back pocket and produced the wallet. She couldn't force herself to smile, but didn't hesitate to take the very thick wad of money.
If he charges double again, this should cover it,
she thought to herself. She shuffled her feet to the pet store, and it took hours. She made a few stops first, though. She bought a few things, including doggy food. The pet store was not going to be open very much longer by the time she arrived. The puppy was laying as flat as possible to avoid the whirling blades just inches from it. She held her hand to the glass, and the puppy did the same. She shuffled her feet into the store.
Excuse me, sir.
Her weary voice felt like solid, strangling smoke.
How much is the doggy in the window?
The man in the apron, the twirled mustache, and money eyes did not skip a beat. The one with the waggly tail? She stared at him, narrowing her eyes with a silent threat. $16, he said, almost singing. The little girl with the matted pigtails opened her palm and counted her remaining money with her free hand. $15.99. The man leaned down once again and counted it, then rose back up and shook his head, never ceasing his mocking smile, revealing all of his teeth like a plastic clown. The money eyes practically glowed. I'm sorry, little girl. You are 1 cent short. The little girl nodded her head and started to walk away. The bag full of things she bought prior to coming here fell to the floor. In her hand, however, remained a gun she made sure to purchase at the pawn shop on her way here. The doggy food crashed as she spun around and fired a single shot into the man in the apron with the twirled mustache and money eyes. Where blood should have come out, instead coins and bills sprayed out, showering the room. The girl reached to turn off the twirling blade above the puppy, then took him out. The puppy licked her face with loving gratitude. The girl collected enough money to replace what she took, then picked up the bag and left. On her way home, she gave the knocked-out homeless man the money back, bought her forever bus pass back from the pawn shop, and then walked off the bus with her new puppy and best friend. She put her father's money back into the wallet and into his pocket. Then she took out of her bag a new piggy bank, and with $1 remaining put it in. She smiled, and the girl with the pigtails and puppy, no longer in the window, fell asleep on her bed with its tail no longer wagging, for they both were finally happy.